Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Griffin, and I'm a filmmaker based out of Orange County, California. And today, I want to talk about a really exciting release from Canon about the brand new Canon C400. So I actually got invited up to LA to go check out the C400 in person, which I was super grateful. Canon invited me so I could get a little bit of hands-on time. There's a whole bunch of other people there as well. But it was really cool to be able to check out the camera, as well as kind of learn about all the different specs and features. And as I was driving back, it's about an hour drive for me, coming from LA back to Orange County. And I was just kind of thinking about some of my first thoughts on the camera, and I figured, hey, why not maybe just kind of share them with you guys, and we can start a little discussion in the comments. But thinking things through, how does this camera stack up against the C500? How does it stack up against the C70? Or maybe some of the other cameras out there, like the Sony FX6 or the Burano, or any number of cameras. I figured I wanted to kind of just share a few of my initial thoughts. First things first, this camera for me really kind of takes all of my favorite things about the cameras that I already have and I already shoot with, like my C500 Mark II, like my C70s, basically, and smashes them all into one body. So what I love about the C70s, I've talked about this a million times on the channel because it's probably beating a dead horse by now, but I love the high frame rates. A lot of what I shoot is automotive work. It's in the off-road space. I'm shooting a lot of slow motion. And what I really use is that 120 frames per second. And for me, it's really got to be in 4K. So what that means is I'll end up using my C70 for the 4K 120, but I do really like the form factor of the C500 Mark II. So when it comes to, interviews, corporate stuff, any sort of, run and gun, documentary stuff, I really do prefer the larger form factor of the C500 Mark II with the full size body. I can run a V-mount off the back with the adapter plate, and all those things are carried over to the C400 as well. It's got the same exact screw holes, so you can run your V-mount plate off the back, which is something I really like. So really, who I see this camera being perfect for is probably anybody that's watched this channel that has a C70 and is looking for kind of that next step. Like, what is it that's going to be maybe the next step up in the cinema line? And you already have a lot of Canon glass, be it EF or RF, or maybe even have some PL glass that you like to use. With the C400 being a full frame sensor natively and not having to use a speed booster, it really kind of opens up all those possibilities. So some of my favorite lenses that I own, obviously aside from my Canon ones, are my iron glass Helios Freehouse lenses. And these lenses are really cool, vintage, lots of character, and I love them on my C500 because you get the full sensor. You get to see all the crazy flaring and all that stuff. But when you put them on the C70, they're PL mount lenses. So you don't get to take advantage of the full sensor when you put them on the C70 because you have to use an RF to PL adapter. Now, when you put them on the C400, you're gonna be able to take advantage of that full sensor, but also with the added bonus that it's got 120 frames per second in C-Log 2, just like the C70 had, that it has that full frame capability as well. A couple of the other things that I am pretty excited about after talking with some of the guys over at Canon, it's got a faster sensor readout than the C500 and the C70 as well. So I've been using my C70 on the Ronin 2 for a lot of car stuff. So we're shooting fast cars in motion, and that's the kind of time where you could really notice a lot of rolling shutter if there's like a lot of road chatter and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about. CVP did an absolutely amazing video. I highly suggest everybody that's watching this video to go watch that video as well. I'll link it below. But they mentioned, I think the rolling shutter was a little bit higher than what I was told. I was personally told, I'm going to reference my notes. They told me it was off the record around 8 milliseconds. So whether it's true or not true, I don't know. Either way, I'm just stoked that it's faster than what it was before. One of the other things that I think is really exciting about this camera is the cable that goes to the monitor. It's one cable, and previously it was this like proprietary cable that was only in this one fixed length. Now they're using a USB-C. USB-C to USB-C, so like probably what your MacBook or hard drives use. But the added bonus here is that it can carry power and data. And then after talking with the guys there, they were mentioning that third parties like maybe Small HD or possibly DJI could basically take that and run data through it. So similar to like, I don't know if you've seen the Red Control monitors that Small HD has. Really amazing, really clean solution. So that's something that I would personally be looking forward to, with like a nice big 7-inch screen, maybe that has transmitting capabilities built in. So you could have that really clean with one cable. And that's an amazing solution that's not currently available for any of the Canon cameras. Another great thing about this camera is the triple base ISO, 800, 3200, 12,800. My friend Levi, who works with me at Vision Creative Co., he has an FX3, and that's a really cool camera. It's limited in some ways, no NDs and stuff like that, but it's got that really high ISO capabilities. So that's a really cool option that it can do 12,800 native. But I do find that, that's just such an extreme ISO versus like the other native at 800. I'm always kind of longing for that in-between ISO, because most of the time if I'm shooting nighttime scenes, it's like 3200, 6400, right around there. So the fact that there's 3 base ISOs built into the C400 is something I'm pretty pumped about. And I can't wait to test that side by side with some of my other cameras that do well in low light, like the R3 that I'm recording on right now, and also the C500 Mark II. Another thing that I think is really cool is the redesigned monitor hinge. If you remember any of my old videos from when I was first doing videos on the C200 or right when the C500 Mark II came out, I was kind of toying around with some really, really similar designs. Not to say they copied me, they didn't. But it's really cool how there's like the 15 mil rod, and it basically allows for more articulation in a more streamlined approach than the way the original C500 monitor was. So that's something I think they really nailed on this design. One thing I wasn't super stoked on was the fact that they used mini XLRs on the back of this camera. Now, I absolutely get it. That's what the C70 had, so maybe you bought the specialty cable that I collaborated on before. But there's a lot of easy solutions and easy fixes there. It's not a huge deal. I understand they crammed a lot into this smaller size camera, which I guess that brings up another point. This camera is significantly smaller than the C500 Mark II or the C300 Mark III, which I think it's that perfect sweet spot. It doesn't feel too small where it's like you're kind of embarrassed to bring it to set because it looks like you're just shooting on a little dinky camera. But it's it's kind of big enough. It's kind of the Goldilocks of sizes, so to speak. But I do wish maybe that we could have traded some other ports for a full-size XLR in this one. Although I probably shouldn't nitpick too much, because if you look at some of the competitors like the FX6, you have to use the whole top handle to get any XLRs whatsoever. So I can understand on a smaller form factor body why they made that choice. One thing that I think is really great about this camera is it's got a 12G SDI, a 3G SDI, and a full-size HDMI port. And what's really awesome about this is you can send different signals to different places with different overlays and LUTs and things like that to kind of simplify it. So how I run it on my C500, it's basically the same thing brought over to the C400. You can run your monitor off the 3G SDI or possibly the USB-C out that they have, like I was talking about earlier. And you can run with all your overlays and your on-screen displays, like your waveform, your zebras, whatever else you use to expose. And then to your client, you can send them a clean feed. So that's something with some of the other cameras that are in the space, like for example, the Komodo X. I don't believe you can send 2 signals, like one to your monitor and then one to the client that's a clean feed. And sometimes like when you're exposing, like I personally like to expose about a stop above, and then I have a LUT that can pull it down. And that's something that like you don't want your client to be like, oh, like, why is it so bright? You're like, dude, like, mind your own business. but yeah, that's not, so anyways, to summarize, full-size HDMI, 3G SDI and 12G SDI leaves you a lot of options on this camera. One thing that I found is a really cool surprise with this camera after playing with it was how snappy the autofocus was. I did find that it was significantly better than the C500 Mark II and the C70 from my very, very limited testing. And guys, I'm gonna get this camera, I'm gonna get it in, I'm gonna do lots of tests, compare it with the C500, compare it to the C70, the R3, whatever. But I did find that it grabbed onto the subject's face immediately in a crowded room. And it was a lot more sticky. Some things that I found with the C70 and the C500 Mark II especially is that face tracking, your face has to be like pretty prominent in frame for it to like lock on. And whereas like the mirrorless line, it's just like much more snappy and grabs on right away. I did find that it was much more similar to the mirrorless line. Now, one notable thing that was missing, at least in the current firmware, maybe I could bug them to add this later. They added obviously eye detection, subject tracking, and then they also added the animal, I think it's like cats and dogs it'll focus on, which is really cool, but it was missing the vehicle autofocus. So as a guy that shoots cars, I would really love to see that added, maybe in a firmware. Hopefully I can kind of nudge them over there and see if they can add that in later, but yeah, it was missing. So what I usually used on the C70 will be the same thing on this. I'll just put on whole area autofocus, and it does a really nice job focusing for that. Another improvement is it uses 100% of the frame to focus instead of 80%. So, take for that what you will. I guess if you're focusing on something like way out to the side, it'll do a better job at that. So how does this camera stack up against a lot of the other competitors in the industry? I think comparing it to some of Canon's own offerings like the C70, C300 Mark III, C500 Mark II, in my opinion, I own those cameras, by the way, so I'm biased to maybe say those cameras are great. This camera's the best. I can tell you that right now. It's got more dynamic range. It's got all the inputs and outputs, and it's got better frame rates and better resolution than all those cameras. So it's really like they took the C500 Mark II, shrunk it down a little bit, and added some more features to it. So how does it compare against some of the other cameras in the industry, like maybe the FX6? I think that's a really outstanding camera at a slightly lower price point. But what you're getting for a little bit more, $2,000 more, I was not a little bit, a lot more. You're getting a camera that's 6K capable and can shoot internal RAW. So those are two gigantic things. I did a video a little while back called like C70s and time to sell or whatever. Some of the things I mentioned in that video were that I'd be looking for in the next camera were an SDI port, a slightly more boxy form factor. And guys, I didn't know any of this stuff at the time. The little screws on the bottom to be like vertically aligned, if that makes sense. And they did all those things. And I'm trying to remember what else. Oh, I also asked for higher than 4K resolution. So for me, they really checked all the boxes. You know, and this camera, I think it probably most closely competes against maybe an FX6 or alternatively the Burano, which, man, I gotta say, if you bought the Burano, you might not be feeling so great after seeing this camera release. But my hopes are that, you know, it takes well to the industry, that a lot of people like to use it. I'm definitely gonna order one for myself. I'm really excited for this camera. Again, this is not a sponsored video in any way, shape, or form. Canon invited me to the event. Nobody paid me. Nobody even let me use the camera at my own house or anything like that. But I am excited to get it and try it out. So what I'd love to know from you guys is, what do you guys think about this camera? Is this a camera that's really exciting for you guys? Do you want to try it out? How do you think it compares to maybe some of the other cameras that are out there? And also, do you see this being a good camera for your business and your workflow? Let's make a little discussion in the comments. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. See you in the next one. Take care.